Charles Krauthammer is a writer and columnist. He joins us live now. Charles, what do you make of the New York Times putting out this editorial that, quite frankly, is embarrassing for them years later to still be pushing this false narrative just 24 hours after a former Bernie Sanders supporter tried to assassinate Republican members of Congress?
It's completely egregious. And it's not just that it's been debunked 6 years later. It was debunked within 3 days. I remember writing a column 4 days after the attack in which it was absolutely, totally obvious that the shooter was a paranoid schizophrenic. He had no idea what was going on. There were no ideas in his head. One of his teachers had said that he was living in his own world. And at the time, this is what's most egregious, people don't even remember. The day after the shooting, the Times ran in its news section, on the front page, something it labeled the news analysis that introduced this false idea that Jared Loughner, the shooter, was motivated by this thing on the website that showed the bullseyes for 20 districts. Jared Loughner was not driven to the crime by a climate of hate, because as everybody who knew him and who testified at the time was saying, this man created his own climate. He was a classic paranoid schizophrenic, and that the Times should drag this out 6 years later was amazing. And even the correction was mealy-mouthed and half-hearted. No connection was proved. No connection was possible. The man was a paranoid psychotic.
And Charles, it goes deeper than that, because then the House Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, comes out today when we just heard Peter Doocy reporting on how lawmakers in both parties say, you know what, maybe folks are going to come together. Maybe people are unified. And Nancy Pelosi has a news conference where she attacks Fox News, number one, but number two, she says Republicans have been more responsible than Democrats for this violent rhetoric. Why within 24 hours is she trying to keep score?
Look, this is a reflex. I see it among Democrats. It is true to some extent among Republicans. This sort of the vitriol in our politics is not unilateral. And I think it's when you get the leadership within 1 day of an event like this, and let's remember, she's a Democrat, and the shooter came out and said, are those Republicans or Democrats on the field? This isn't a guy who went out to shoot people. This is a guy who went out to shoot Republican people. If you're a Democrat, you ought to have at least the decency and a Democratic leader to wait a while before leveling accusations. I do believe if the leadership were more careful, if they were less ad hominem in their arguments, and as I was saying earlier tonight in Special Report, if they were less apocalyptic in speaking about the other side, the other guys win, it's the end of the republic, the end of the world. You know, if climate change is not, you don't listen to me on climate change, you are a denier, like a Holocaust denier. If that language weren't so extreme, we would have the beginning of a de-escalation, and that's what we need.
Charles, I have 1 minute. The shooter in this case, now dead, also has Facebook posts where he was just disgusting in his attacks. I don't even want to repeat them, against President Trump. But you've raised questions before about President Trump, whether he really wants to bring people together or not. Is this an opportunity for him? He gave strong remarks yesterday, the president, about unity at a video here at the game. Is there an opportunity for the president here?
Look, there is, and I think he rose to the occasion in the remarks he made that you showed from the video before. But, you know, he's not blameless. It's not a one-party thing. He was quite aggressive in the campaign. He says he's a fighter, a counterpuncher. He was even aggressive against his Republican colleagues, his Republican opponents. I think this is a time when we can all look back and say neither side here is blameless. Time to do the obvious, to declare a kind of armistice on the vitriol and the apocalyptic rhetoric, and simply say we're a republic, we have a loyal opposition, let's be loyal, let's be civil on both sides. I think it can be done. I don't despair of this. And I think maybe an event like this, perhaps it'll have to be some other event, which would be tragic. but perhaps that can happen, and I'm sure that the country would appreciate it.
Here, here. You're absolutely right, Charles Krauthammer, that neither side is blameless. Go ahead.
Let me just say, I have been watching the game, and there's a hell of a lot of stealing going on down there. I don't want to cast aspersions, but I'd keep my eye on
Who's stealing, the Democrats or the Republicans? Who's stealing more?
Equal opportunity stealing, and we got catchers who are somewhat superannuated, if I can be kind.
Well, it's been a difficult 24 hours or so here. Maybe we can have a little bit of levity. We appreciate that. Charles Krauthammer, thank you for joining us.